Welcome to the world of daily life stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy listening. The Call of Duty. Marcus Johnson had never imagined his life would take the turn it had. At 28, he found himself in an upscale restaurant, dressed in a crisp white shirt, serving meals to customers, despite the fact that he had earned a bachelor's degree in business administration just a few years ago. It wasn't his dream job, but the grim reality of the job market had dictated his choices. After countless applications and interviews, Marcus had been forced to take whatever work he could find. The bills didn't care about degrees, and neither did the world. The Silver Spoon, a popular restaurant in downtown Chicago, had become his place of refuge. The long hours and demanding customers had forged his character, instilling within him a strong sense of duty and the value of hard work. The tips were good, the colleagues were kind, and the boss was understanding. But every time Marcus returned home at the end of a shift, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was meant for something more. Growing up in a working-class family on the south side of Chicago, Marcus had learned the importance of grit and perseverance. His father, a construction worker, and his mother, a nurse, had instilled in him values of sacrifice and empathy. They taught him that no job was too small, no task beneath him. His parents had given him a foundation of hard work and compassion, qualities that helped him succeed in the restaurant business. However, Marcus always carried a sense of yearning, an unspoken belief that he could contribute more to the world. On that Friday evening, the restaurant buzzed with energy. The air was thick with the sound of clinking glasses, soft chatter, and the occasional burst of laughter. Servers scurried between tables, delivering plates of gourmet food, while bartenders expertly mixed cocktails behind the polished counter. Marcus moved with practiced ease, his tray steady as he navigated the busy floor, always with a warm smile ready to greet every guest. As he approached his assigned section, he noticed something out of the ordinary. A woman in a wheelchair was being seated at one of his tables. She had silver-streaked hair, and despite the signs of age, there was a certain vitality in her eyes. They were kind eyes that crinkled with every smile, but beneath that warmth, Marcus couldn't help but sense a quiet sadness, as if something lingered in her heart that she hadn't shared with the world. "Good evening, ma'am. Welcome to the Silver Spoon. My name is Marcus, and I'll be your server tonight," he greeted, his voice polite, yet carrying a trace of genuine warmth. "May I start you off with something to drink?" The woman looked up slowly, her eyes meeting his. For a brief moment, there was something in her gaze, a flicker of recognition, perhaps? But before Marcus could dwell on it, the feeling vanished, replaced by a soft, welcoming smile. "I'll have a glass of white wine, please," she replied. "Whatever you recommend." Marcus, still puzzled by the momentary connection he thought he'd felt, nodded and turned to fetch the wine. As he walked away, he found himself thinking about the woman. There was something about her demeanor, something that made him feel as though he was meant to serve her in a way that was more than just taking her order. When he returned with a crisp glass of Chardonnay, the woman was studying the menu intently, her fingers running along the edges of the paper as though she were trying to make a decision that went beyond food. "Have you decided on your meal, or would you like a few more minutes?" Marcus asked politely. The woman looked up, her eyes lighting up as she smiled. "I think I'm ready," she said. "I'll have the pan-seared scallops, please." As Marcus scribbled her order, she paused for a moment before adding, "Marcus, would you mind joining me for a moment? I have something I'd like to discuss with you." Taken aback, Marcus hesitated. It wasn't typical for customers to request a server's company at the table, but there was something in the woman's voice, something calm and compelling, that made him pause and reconsider. It was as if she was asking for more than just his attention. He glanced around, ensuring that his other tables were settled, and he had time to spare. "Of course, ma'am. I have a few minutes," he said, pulling out a chair and sitting down across from her. The woman leaned forward slightly, folding her hands on the table. Her expression softened, and she gazed at Marcus with a mixture of gratitude and something else, something unspoken. "I want to thank you for your service tonight, Marcus," she began, her voice low but steady. "But more than that, I want to thank you for something you did a long time ago." something you probably don't even remember. Marcus blinked, unsure of what to make of her words. I'm sorry, ma'am, but I don't understand. Have we met before? The woman shook her head, her lips curling into a sad, knowing smile. No, we haven't met before, but 5 years ago, you changed my life. Marcus felt a pang of confusion, and yet, there was something in her eyes, something that made his heart skip a beat. He racked his brain, trying to place her face, trying to connect the dots, but he came up empty. She reached into her purse, pulling out a folded piece of paper. Slowly, she laid it on the table, smoothing out the creases with her fingertips. The paper was an old newspaper clipping, the edges yellowed with age. Marcus glanced at the headline. Local hero saves woman from burning car. There was a grainy black and white photo beneath it, showing a young man, his face smudged with soot, helping paramedics load someone into an ambulance. The man in the photo was unmistakably Marcus, though he barely recognized himself in the picture. The woman pointed to the photo. This is you, isn't it? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus's heart stopped. The memory hit him like a tidal wave, the screech of tires, the smell of burning rubber, the heat of the flames. He had been walking home from a late-night study session when he saw the car crash. Without a second thought, he had rushed to the scene, pulling the unconscious driver from the wreckage, just seconds before the car exploded. He had never known the identity of the woman he had saved, and after giving his statement to the police, he had gone home, cleaned himself up, and tried to bury the memory of that traumatic night. Marcus nodded slowly, his voice faltering. Yes, that's me. But, how did you know? The woman's eyes filled with tears as she spoke, her voice trembling. Because the woman you saved that day was my daughter, Emily. Marcus felt the ground beneath him shift. The woman's words seemed to hang in the air, unreal, like a dream he couldn't wake from. He remembered the accident vividly, but he had never known what happened to the woman he had pulled from the car. He had saved her life, but it had never occurred to him that his actions had impacted someone in such a profound way. Emily, he repeated the name, his voice thick with emotion. It felt foreign on his tongue, as though it belonged to someone else. The woman nodded, wiping away a tear. She's alive. She's alive, thanks to you. Her voice cracked as she continued, she suffered severe burns, but she survived, Marcus. She survived because of your bravery. You gave her a second chance at life. In that moment, Marcus realized the weight of what he had done. What had felt like an instinctive act, a moment of pure reflex, had changed the course of someone's entire existence. And yet, as he sat there, staring at the woman across from him, he couldn't help but feel a sense of disbelief. All these years, he had moved through life as though the accident had been just another fleeting moment, a passing event in the blur of his journey. But now, sitting at this table, he realized that what he had done that night had truly made a difference in someone's world. Is she okay? He asked quietly, his voice breaking with emotion. The woman's eyes shimmered with tears, but she nodded, her face softening with a smile. She's more than okay. She's thriving, Marcus. And it's all because of you. For the first time in years, Marcus felt as though he had found his purpose. A long-awaited reunion. Marcus sat in stunned silence, the weight of the woman's words settling around him like a heavy cloak. His heart beat loudly in his chest, each thud reverberating in his ears. He had saved someone's life. He had been a hero, without even knowing it. The realization was staggering. It wasn't that Marcus had ever been humble about the act itself, in fact, he had dismissed it entirely. He had never thought of himself as a hero. It was just something that had happened in the moment, a decision made without thought, without any expectation of recognition. He had been walking home from the library that night, tired and distracted by the stress of finals, when the crash occurred. The explosion of the car's tires had ripped through the quiet streets, and instinct had kicked in. He had rushed forward, pulled the woman from the wreckage, and helped her to safety. But he had never known what happened to her. He had never learned the extent of her injuries or if she survived. The police had thanked him, a few reporters had snapped photos, and then everything had faded away. He had gone back to his life, back to his studies and his ambitions, without ever imagining that one day the woman he had saved would sit across from him at a table in a restaurant. And now here she was, smiling softly at him through her tears, her gratitude filling the space between them. "Emily," Marcus whispered, still trying to process the gravity of the revelation. He had always thought of that night as a blur, something tragic, something he could forget. But now, hearing her name, hearing the woman's voice quiver with emotion, everything had changed. The woman nodded again, her hands clasped tightly together on the table. "Her name is Emily. And she's alive, Marcus. She's alive because of you. She wanted to come here tonight, to thank you herself, but she's been through so much, the scars, the recovery. It's been a long road." A lump formed in Marcus's throat as he tried to imagine the journey Emily had endured. The burns. The physical pain. The emotional trauma. How could anyone come back from something so horrific? But then he realized, she had. She had fought, she had survived. She had lived. And that was because of him. "I didn't do anything extraordinary," Marcus muttered, his voice full of self-doubt. "I just did what anyone would have done." The woman shook her head, her expression firm, her gaze unwavering. "No, Marcus. You did something extraordinary. You didn't just act on instinct. You saved a life. You gave my daughter a second chance. That is extraordinary. And I wanted you to know that." Marcus looked at the newspaper clipping again. He had always thought the story of the accident would remain a fleeting moment in his life, something that would be lost to time. But now, in this moment, that story had a new meaning. It had become a thread that connected him to a woman he had never met before, to a family he had never known, and to a life he had unknowingly impacted. "I don't know what to say," Marcus admitted, his voice trembling slightly. "I never expected anything like this. I never thought about it again." "Why would you?" she replied with a soft smile. "You were just a young man who did what anyone would have done in that situation. But that's what makes you special, Marcus. It's the people who do the right thing, even when no one is watching, who change the world. My daughter doesn't remember much about that night. She was unconscious. But I remember the police officer telling me that you pulled her out of that car with nothing but courage and strength. You were the first person she saw when she woke up. And you were the reason she survived." Tears welled up in Marcus's eyes. He had been so focused on his own life, on trying to make something of himself, that he had never truly understood the ripple effect his actions had on the world. All those years of working at the Silver Spoon, serving tables, listening to people's stories, had never once connected him to the impact he had made. "Do you know what that means to me?" the woman continued, her voice softening. "To hear that you don't even know what you did? To know that a simple act of kindness, a split-second decision, changed the course of our lives forever? I wanted you to know that you weren't forgotten. Emily and we think about you often. I think of you as the man who saved my daughter. I think of you as a hero. And so does Emily." Marcus felt the weight of her words sink into his soul. He had been living his life on autopilot, drifting from one day to the next, questioning his purpose. But now, in this moment, with this woman before him, he realized that purpose had been there all along. He had already made a difference. He had already impacted the world, even if he hadn't known it. The woman reached into her purse again and pulled out another item. This time, it was a small framed photograph. She slid it across the table to him, her fingers trembling slightly. "This is Emily, the way she looks now. It's been 5 years since the accident, but she's alive. She's thriving. She's living her life, because you gave her that chance." Marcus picked up the photograph, his breath catching in his throat as he saw the woman in the picture. She was sitting on a bench, her long brown hair flowing in the wind, a wide smile on her face. Her face was scarred, but there was a light in her eyes that was unmistakable. The light of someone who had fought their way back from the brink of death. Someone who had endured the unimaginable, and yet had found a way to live again. In that moment, Marcus saw it. He saw the life he had saved. He saw the hope that had been given back to someone who had once been lost. And he realized that, though he had never asked for recognition, he had been part of something far greater than himself. The woman, sensing his awe, spoke softly. "Emily wants you to know that she's not defined by the scars. She's not defined by what happened to her. She's a survivor. And she owes her survival to you, Marcus." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Marcus held the photograph for a moment longer, feeling the weight of the truth that had been placed upon him. He wasn't just a waiter, wasn't just a man serving food in a restaurant. He was a person who had changed a life, who had altered the trajectory of another human being's story. And in that moment, Marcus realized something profound. Sometimes, the world doesn't ask you to be extraordinary. Sometimes, all it takes is one moment of bravery, one act of kindness, to make an everlasting difference. As the woman smiled at him across the table, Marcus felt the burden of his doubt begin to lift. Maybe he wasn't where he thought he should be in life. Maybe he hadn't followed the path he had dreamed of. But in this moment, he realized that he had already done something far more important than any degree, any job, or any title could ever offer him. He had made a difference. And for the first time in a long time, Marcus felt the weight of the world on his shoulders, this time, in a way that made him proud. The courage to move forward. The days following Marcus's encounter with the woman in the restaurant felt surreal, like a dream he couldn't shake. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Emily's face, the face of the woman he had saved, the woman whose life he had unknowingly altered. He had spent the past few years of his life focused on surviving, on working at the Silver Spoon, paying bills, getting by, but he had never stopped to ask himself whether he was truly living. Now, he couldn't stop thinking about it. As the weekend passed, Marcus went through the motions of his regular routine. He still served tables, still smiled at customers, still did his job with the same professionalism he always had. But something had shifted inside him. The humdrum of daily life no longer felt the same. Every time he glanced at the newspaper clipping the woman had given him, or at the framed photo of Emily, he was reminded that there was more to life than just going through the motions. There was purpose. There was meaning. It was as if a door had been opened, and Marcus couldn't turn back. The question that lingered in his mind now wasn't about his job, his degree, or his lack of career prospects, it was about something deeper. What if this wasn't all there was? What if this moment was a wake-up call, a sign that he had been living in the shadows of his own potential? One morning, as he sat on a park bench during his lunch break, Marcus ran his fingers over the edges of the newspaper clipping. He had folded it carefully and tucked it in his pocket, unwilling to part with it. The story of the burning car, of the rescue, had become a symbol of something far greater. It was a reminder of the man he was capable of being, the man who acted with courage in a moment of crisis. And yet, somehow, he had forgotten that. He had buried that part of himself beneath layers of doubt, of unfulfilled ambition, of a job that didn't bring him joy. Maybe he had been wrong to dismiss the importance of what he had done. Maybe his calling wasn't about climbing the corporate ladder or working in an office. Maybe it was about something more profound, about using his experiences, his empathy, his courage to help others. He didn't know yet how he would do it, but the idea began to take root in his heart. He had saved Emily 5 years ago. What if he could do more than just serve food for a living? What if he could truly change the lives of those around him, just as he had changed Emily's? He wasn't sure what it would look like, but he knew one thing: he couldn't keep living as if his actions didn't matter. He had to step into the life he was meant to lead. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of reflection. Marcus began to take long walks after work, processing everything he had learned about himself. His relationship with his job at the Silver Spoon began to shift, and he felt less like a cog in the machine and more like someone who could make a difference, even within the small corners of his life. He started talking to people, really talking to them. Instead of just going through the motions of customer service, he asked his regulars about their lives. He listened to their stories. He learned about their struggles, their triumphs, their passions. It wasn't just about serving them anymore, it was about connecting with them. Through these conversations, he learned that so many people felt lost, just as he had. They were all searching for meaning, just as he had been. One evening, after an especially long shift, Marcus was cleaning up his section when a man in his late 40s approached him. He was tall, with salt and pepper hair and a weary expression. Marcus recognized him as a frequent customer, a businessman who often came in alone, always buried in paperwork. Tonight, however, the man seemed different. His shoulders slumped as if the weight of the world had fallen on them. "Hey, Marcus," the man said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "I've been coming here for a while now, and I've noticed something about you." Marcus looked up from his work, confused. "Oh? What's that?" "You've got this energy about you," the man continued. "I don't know how to explain it, but when you serve people, it's like you're not just doing a job. You care. I see it in the way you listen, the way you pay attention. People notice that." The words hit Marcus like a wave, his mind racing. No one had ever said anything like that to him before. Sure, he was polite, and he made a point to be kind to his customers, but had it really made that much of a difference? Had people been noticing the way he tried to engage with them on a deeper level? He had never thought about it before. The man continued, his eyes searching Marcus's face. "It's not just about the food or the drink, is it? I can tell you're looking for something more. You're looking for meaning, purpose. I can see it in the way you talk to people." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. It was as if the man could see into his soul, into the doubts and questions that had been brewing inside him for weeks. "You're right," Marcus admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been trying to figure that out. I've been wondering if this is all there is for me, you know? Serving people, getting by. I don't know what my purpose is yet, but I think I'm supposed to do something more. Something that matters." The man nodded thoughtfully, his gaze steady. "You know, Marcus, I used to feel the same way. I was stuck in a dead-end job for years, doing something I hated. But one day, I realized something. It's not about waiting for something to happen to you. It's about deciding to make something happen. I'm a mentor for young people now, helping them find direction, helping them see that they can do more than just get by. And let me tell you, Marcus, nothing feels more fulfilling than that." The word struck a chord deep within Marcus. A mentor? Helping others? He had never thought about it that way. But now that the idea was planted in his mind, he couldn't stop thinking about it. The next few months were transformative for Marcus. He began to take small steps toward changing the course of his life. He started volunteering at local community centers, offering career advice to young people who were struggling to find their way. He shared his story of overcoming adversity, how he had come from humble beginnings, and was now working toward a future that he was proud of. At the same time, he continued to serve at the Silver Spoon, but his perspective had shifted. He wasn't just a waiter anymore, he was a connector, a person who could make a difference, no matter how small. He saw the impact of his actions in the conversations he had with his customers, in the way they thanked him for listening, for caring. And little by little, Marcus began to understand that his life had meaning. His actions had consequences. He had the power to change lives, just as he had changed Emily's all those years ago. It wasn't easy. There were days when Marcus doubted himself, when the weight of his dreams felt too heavy to bear. But he kept going. He kept pushing. Because, as he had learned that fateful night with the woman in the restaurant, one moment of courage, one decision to help someone, could change the course of a life forever. And now, Marcus was ready to live his life with that same courage. He was ready to make a difference. Stepping into his purpose. Months passed, and Marcus's life took on a new rhythm. He had become a different man, driven not by the daily grind or the weight of unmet expectations, but by a deep-seated sense of purpose. His work at the Silver Spoon remained important to him, not because it was his dream job, but because it gave him the platform to connect with people from all walks of life, each with their own story, their own struggles. Every conversation he had, whether with a regular customer or someone passing through town, left an impression on him. He began to see his job not as a temporary pit stop but as a vital part of his mission, to listen, to care, and to offer what little help he could. Still, Marcus knew he was destined for more. The seeds that had been planted in him over the months were growing into something he couldn't ignore any longer. His experiences, both as the person who had saved a life and the man who now helped others by sharing his own story, were leading him toward a new path. He could no longer continue to push aside the feeling that there was something more meaningful for him to do, something that would give him fulfillment and allow him to impact the world in a more profound way. One evening, while walking home after another long shift at the Silver Spoon, Marcus found himself at the corner of a quiet street. The cool breeze ruffled his jacket as he stood there, taking in the quiet of the night. His thoughts wandered back to that fateful night 5 years ago, the night he had rushed toward the burning car, without thinking of the danger, without knowing what would happen next. He had acted because something inside him had simply said, "This is what I must do." He felt the same pull now, the same urgency to do more, to be more, to step into his full potential. What would it look like, he wondered, if he lived a life fully aligned with that purpose? What if his journey wasn't just about surviving, but about truly living, about making an impact on others in a way that was sustainable and transformative? Marcus had thought a lot about mentorship since his conversation with the businessman at the restaurant. He had spent countless hours researching programs that allowed people to become mentors, especially for young people in underserved communities. One particular program caught his eye, a nonprofit organization focused on career development and mentorship for young adults who had faced challenges similar to his own: poverty, systemic barriers, and the lack of opportunities. The more Marcus read about the organization, the more his heart stirred. This was it. This was the thing that had been missing from his life, the opportunity to guide others, to be the light that others had once been for him. He could share his experiences, help young people understand that their past didn't have to define their future, and show them that they too could rise above their circumstances. His heart raced at the thought. It felt like the next chapter of his story was finally being written. The decision wasn't immediate. Marcus didn't simply quit his job at the Silver Spoon and jump into the unknown. He understood that there was work to be done before he could fully commit to this new chapter. He needed to learn more, train more, and find the right way to transition into this new role. But he was certain of one thing: he wasn't afraid anymore. For the first time in years, Marcus saw a clear path forward. He began attending workshops and seminars about mentorship and leadership, soaking in knowledge and sharpening his skills. Every evening after his shift, he would read books on personal development, volunteer at local youth organizations, and speak with mentors who had already walked the path he was now treading. Slowly but surely, Marcus was reshaping his future, and with each step he took, he felt more and more confident in his ability to make a lasting difference in someone else's life. One day, he mustered up the courage to apply for a formal position with the nonprofit. The process was rigorous, requiring not only an interview but also a series of practical assessments to test his ability to connect with young people, to motivate them, and to help them set and achieve their goals. Marcus approached the process with the same commitment and perseverance he had shown throughout his life. He knew that this opportunity wasn't just a job, it was his chance to do the work that had been calling to him for years. Weeks later, he received an email inviting him to join the organization as a mentor. The excitement that surged through him was overwhelming. He had done it. He had taken a risk. He had chosen to pursue his purpose, and now he was being given the opportunity to guide others through their struggles and challenges. The first day on the job was surreal. Marcus arrived at the community center early, feeling a mix of nerves and anticipation. The young people in the program had faced challenges far beyond what he had experienced in his own life. They were at a crossroads, unsure of what direction to take, unsure if they even had a future worth fighting for. But Marcus could relate. He had been there once, feeling lost, disconnected, and overwhelmed by the obstacles that seemed insurmountable. When he walked into the room for the first time, he saw a group of teenagers sitting in a circle, looking at him with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. He recognized the expressions. He had worn them once himself. But there was something different in the air that day, something tangible, something full of possibility. "Hey, I'm Marcus," he began, standing in front of the group. "I'm here because I believe in you. I believe in your ability to change your life. And I'm here to help you make that happen." He spoke to them with authenticity, telling them about his own journey, how he had worked at the Silver Spoon, how he had been a hero without knowing it, how he had found his own way despite the odds. He didn't sugarcoat his story. He spoke honestly about the struggles, the failures, and the doubts. And as he spoke, he saw something in the eyes of the young people that he hadn't seen before: hope. It was a moment of connection that he would never forget. He had been where they were, and now he was in front of them, not as someone who had it all figured out, but as someone who had learned to rise above adversity and find purpose. He wasn't offering them easy answers or guarantees. What he was offering was something more powerful, the belief that they could change their lives, just as he had changed his. The following months were full of learning and growth, for both Marcus and the young people he mentored. He was often surprised by their resilience, their creativity, and their capacity for change. In many ways, they taught him as much as he taught them. Through their struggles, their victories, and their setbacks, Marcus realized that the work he was doing was far more than just mentorship, it was a partnership. He wasn't saving them. They were saving themselves. He was just there to guide them along the way, to provide the tools, the encouragement, and the belief that they could do it. One day, as he sat down with a young man named Devin, who had been struggling to find a job, Marcus couldn't help but reflect on how far he had come. Devin had been doubting himself, uncertain about his future. He felt like he was destined for failure. But after weeks of working together, Devin had found his confidence. He had finally secured a job interview. It wasn't a guaranteed success, but it was a start. "I never thought I'd be here," Devin said, looking at Marcus with a smile that was both proud and humbled. "You really helped me believe in myself again. I didn't think I had a chance before you came along." Marcus smiled back, his heart swelling with pride. "You had the chance all along, Devin. You just needed someone to help you see it." It was in moments like these that Marcus felt the full weight of his purpose. He hadn't known it at the time, but saving Emily had been only the beginning of his journey. Now, he was saving lives in a different way, not by pulling people from burning cars, but by helping them rise from the metaphorical wreckage of their own doubts and fears. As he looked at the young people he had mentored, and as he watched them find their own paths, Marcus knew that he had found his purpose. He was no longer just serving food in a restaurant or working a job to get by. He was living a life that mattered. A life that was changing the world, one person at a time. And he would never again doubt that every act of kindness, every moment of courage, every decision to stand up for someone else, mattered. Because the truth was, Marcus had discovered something far greater than career success or recognition. He had discovered his calling, to help others believe in themselves and, in doing so, to help them change their lives. In the end, Marcus understood that being a hero didn't always mean being the one to save the day. Sometimes, it was about helping others discover their own power. And that, Marcus realized, was the true meaning of living a life that mattered.